basically, having this prognosis of, well, I don't know how long this medication is going to work for, because we still don't know how long it'll work. It hasn't been around for that long. So it was like, I'm moving to Orlando, going to wakeboard. Don't know what's going to happen after that, but that's just what I'm going to do. Nice. And when you're kind of the cancer girl, people can't really say no to you. So that's where I kind of just told everyone what I was going to do. I'm Alexa Score, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. We got a fantastic guest for you. I was introduced to Alexa Score, and she is a very interesting young lady. One of the things that caught my eye about her right away is that she's from Minnesota, and she's a professional wakeboarder. I wondered how those two things came together and looked into her story more, and she is way more than either one of those. She's a cancer survivor, and that has had a big impact on her life, and she's still dealing with it today. So we're going to get to ask her all of these questions that I have about becoming a professional wakeboarder, and also how she is using that to transcend wakeboarding and go into television broadcasting. So we also want to thank today's sponsors. Empire Boat Covers has been a great sponsor of the show, so you definitely want to go support them. If you need an affordable boat cover for your boat, your RV, your jet ski, your grill, anything, go to empirecovers.com/TRP. You can get 15% off your entire order plus free shipping. So go there today and check out everything that they have to offer. Go to barracuda.tackle.com. and get a brand new cast net for the fall bait run. The mullet are out there. You probably need a new cast net. And if you're looking for one, Barracuda Tackle is the place to go. You can also go to boathammockstand.com. They are a great supporter of the podcast, so we want to support them as well. If you're looking for a way to be more comfortable in your boat after you've cleaned it up and you're sitting at the dock, or you're on the sandbar, or you're spending the night offshore, check it out. You put a stand in your rod holder and you can hang a hammock on your boat. Very cool. So go check out all of our great sponsors. Now on to the show. All right. We have Alexa. Alexa, how are you today?
Doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's cool. Approaching fall, and I know that you're in Minnesota, and fall means something different than a Floridian or even somewhere in the middle of the country. But if fall seems like it would be kind of a fleeting moment in time in Minnesota.
Totally. It's a quick transition, or it has been this year, from summer 80-degree days straight into 40-degree weather. So everyone's busting out all their fall gear. And usually people it's sad to see summer go, but then there's so many different activities in the fall that we're pretty pumped.
What do you like to do in the fall?
Fishing,
Are you a hunt? Do you like to hunt?
Yeah, I grew up hunting with my dad. I didn't get to do it much when I was living in Orlando for 10 years, but do some duck hunting and deer hunting, and then, all of your fall activities. So making fires and still getting some fishing in and all that fun stuff.
Right on. You grew up in Minnesota and started. Is your dad the one that got you into the outdoors?
It's funny. So I grew up with my dad in a super small town, Spicer, Minnesota, 1,000 people. And he was an outdoorsman, avid, hunter. He didn't really do much fishing, but super into hunting. But he never really pushed me to do that. I kind of got into it myself. I was like, hey, I'm thinking about getting, gun safety. I'd really like to start hunting. And he's like, okay. So in high school, I'd go hunting with my high school buddies, show up to school in camo and then change into a pink, really girly outfit after I got to school. But yeah, I would deer hunt and duck hunt a little bit with my dad. But then I was super big into ice fishing too, which was more just friends were into that. So
well, ice fishing
was a lot of fun.
Ice fishing can also be code for drinking beer, right? Is that
and playing cards?
Yeah, drinking beer and playing cards. I mean, that's kind of we have some things that are code for that too. But I would think that ice fishing, like that's something that I've never really gotten into that much because I don't know. I find it, well, the reason that I ended up in the Florida Keys was because I tried to spend a winter in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and it was too cold. So I went as far south as you can possibly go. So I don't know if I'm really cut out for ice fishing, but I do like the idea when my friends up there, Mark Zona, I think, was telling me about fishing the hard water versus fishing the soft water. And I thought, oh, I think I know what he's talking about. That's ice. Like that's all winter long. It's like that. But the ice fishing can be really good. Like you get out on the snow machine and you go and find the spots and you can have some really good fishing in the middle of the winter. So one of the things that I found interesting about your story right away was that you turn out to be a professional wakeboarder from Minnesota, which it seems like that would be a super fleeting moment too. The time of the year where you would be able to wakeboard in Minnesota would seem to be a very small window. So how did that happen for you, where you kind of got the interest in wakeboarding and then actually made that into something that you did for a lot of time?
That's kind of everyone's first question. Like Minnesota and water sports, like that just doesn't make sense to me. Summer's so short. But my answer is kind of, that's actually why I was so passionate about water sports. People here in Minnesota, because the season is only 3 months long, you are on the water every moment that you possibly can be. I mean, we have 12,000 lakes. Lake life, the culture is a huge thing here. So any minute that you can be out there, you're taking advantage of it. I mean, when I first moved to Florida and moved to a lake in Orlando, it would be glass calm and beautiful. And I'm like, no one's on the lake.
Right.
Like, this is so bizarre to me. Like, this is the weirdest thing. It's the middle of the day and no one's out here and it's glass. And it's like, well, everyone's like, well, it'll be this way tomorrow or maybe next week or whatever. Here, it's like, you're out. I mean, tubers are out at 6 a.m., until the sun goes down. Everyone's out there. So I think that short season actually really contributed to my passion for water sports and my love for water sports. But you're right. I only had 3 months to train when I was living here. So it was like you spend a month getting back in shape at the beginning of the season,
Right.
Then you only have 2 months to learn new stuff. So that was why I made the decision to move down to Orlando when I was 17, just so I could wakeboard year round.
At 17. Wow. Were you still in school? Like you were still in high school or what?
I graduated high school early.
Okay.
So I'm in this small town high school and I was like, walked into my principal's office and was like, I want to graduate early. And he's like, no one's ever done that. How does that work? I'm like, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. And so we did and ended up graduating high school a semester early and then just getting in the car and driving down.
And so tell me about that decision. I mean, that seems like a place in your life where you're making major changes. Like were your parents like a part of that decision, or did you just decide that this is something that you're doing?
Yeah, so I kind of just told them what I was going to do. My dad's kind of always been the person where he's like, fine, but you have to figure it out. Like, sure, go for it, but like, good luck. A big part of that move was my sister. So I have an older sister who's 9 years older than me. She was 26 at the time. And she was living in Minnesota, but she's like, I wouldn't mind moving to Orlando. So she and I made that trip together. And she was a big part of why I was able to do that. We still couch surfed and didn't really know anyone or what we were doing when we moved down there. But obviously having her there made it a completely different and much easier experience.
Yeah. So was she as into the water sports, or did she just want to thaw out a little bit?
Yeah, she is. I mean, she came home one summer and that's when I was introduced to wakeboarding. Her and her college buddies started wakeboarding. And that's when I was like, whoa, what is this? What is this thing? Because I was a gymnast and I was kind of a tomboy and I loved water sports. So wakeboarding was like all of that in one. And so, yeah, she and I wakeboarded together a lot and kind of pushed each other. And then when we moved down to Orlando, she wasn't really pursuing it competitively like I was. But a week after we moved to Orlando, she tore her ACL we were 1 week, 7 days after we moved to Orlando, she tore her ACL wakeboarding. So that was the end of it for her.
Wow.
But she was, she definitely, she and I were into it together.
Yeah. So that's, man, you're a week into your new life and your sister tears her ACL and she's how many years older than you?
9.
Okay. Well, I mean, she's a full on adult, but you're 17.
Yeah.
Like that seems like that's, I don't know. I mean, I have a 17-year-old daughter that I can't even imagine her living off on her own and then dealing with something like that. But you dealt with lots of other things in your life that probably gave you a lot of maturity and a different perspective as well, right?
Correct. Yeah, definitely. So, a year and a half before I moved to Orlando, I was diagnosed with leukemia. And so at 16, going into my junior year of school, was diagnosed with that and was very, very sick. And the prognosis was really unknown. So I started, I was supposed to have a bone marrow transplant. That was the only treatment option at the time, which was very dangerous and not necessarily that successful always. But I had one doctor that I really liked, and he suggested I try this experimental drug that was brand new at the time, but he thought maybe that would just buy me some time at least, if it worked. And I started that medication, and it worked in controlling the level of cancer in my blood. And I actually still continue to take that medication 14 years later. But at the time it was like, we don't know if this is going to work. If it does work, we don't know how long it'll work for. It was just all these unknowns.
Yeah.
So that definitely, definitely gave me the perspective. And I was on my own a lot growing up as a kid with my dad. So, I had some maturity, but a lot of maturity it takes time, right? Like, even if you've been through a lot, like you just learn from living. So, only being on the earth for 17 years, there were obviously so many things that I didn't know, but I definitely had the perspective and kind of that maturity from the leukemia experience.
Dude, what was that drug called?
It's called Gleevec.
Okay. And so what is that? I mean, did you have I don't know, I have a similar kind of experience with my son that he did kind of an experimental procedure on his eyes. And there was this moment in time where we were being told by some people, no, do not do this. It's going to be a terrible idea. Don't do this. And then other people that are saying, well, what do you have to lose? I mean, it was kind of a situation like a bone marrow transplant. That's serious business.
Yes.
So what was that like to kind of analyze those two different choices and take a pick of one of them?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Because like I said, this one doctor was the only person who even mentioned this drug. I was very lucky that he knew of it at the time. I had multiple other doctors say, you need a bone marrow transplant or you're going to die. Looking me in the eyes saying this. One thing that I had on my side was both of my parents are pharmacists.
Okay.
So they're very knowledgeable when it comes to drugs. So they were able to provide some insight. But at the end of the day, they let me make the decision, would you like to try this? And it was similar to the situation that you talked about. It was like, well, what do we have to lose? Let's try this drug. And granted, there was a timeline because you can only have a bone marrow transplant if you're so healthy. So, I couldn't have waited very long to make the decision, but I did have enough time to at least try this other medication. But then after trying it, I got so sick from the meds that they thought the meds were going to kill me. So that was a really interesting, we were this close to taking me off the drug.
Really?
Like a day, in 24 hours. And I started feeling better the next day. It was very, very serendipitous, very interesting. Wow. There's a girl I found out about her story on the news. She grew up 40 minutes from me. We were diagnosed. We were both 16. We were diagnosed at the exact same time. Which is I have a very rare disease. It's mostly affects people over the age of 65. It's very rare for an adolescent to have this kind of cancer. So she started the drug that I take. And because her side effects got so bad, they pulled her off and she did a bone marrow transplant. 3-sport athlete, was never able to do sports again because the radiation destroyed her bones. And I was able to speak with her. And a couple of years ago, and I said, did anyone just suggest that maybe those side effects would go away eventually? And she's like, no. So really, it was like, it's just having those people in my life, that doctor, my parents, that type of thing. I'm able to make it past that point where the side effects, lessened a little bit, and was able to stand that drug. But so many things could have sent me down a different path.
Wow. So as pharmacists, both of your parents are pharmacists. What does a pharmacist say? I mean, I guess, thinking about it now, even for just a second, a pharmacist would see lots of experimental drugs that are very successful, and then they would see lots of experimental drugs that are not. So,
right.
I mean, I guess, is that where they were of like, you need to make this decision because here are the risks and here are the rewards that you could possibly face? Is that kind of how that went down?
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't a lot of time to like have like those really long discussions about it. I had such chemistry with this doctor that I really trusted him a lot, and much more than one of the other doctors is now the president of the School of Medicine at the University of Minnesota. And I'm like, well, he didn't know about Gleevec. Right. But I had such faith in this doctor and had such chemistry with him that I really trusted him. Obviously, my parents' insight helped, but based off of what he told me, I felt really comfortable that the downside to trying this drug wasn't that great. I mean, we had enough time to try it and see what happened. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there were some really dark moments when I was really, really sick. I mean, I was spending some days I was too weak to hold my hairbrush up and brush my hair. Like I couldn't shower. I was sitting in the shower. I'd not get out of bed all day, couldn't walk because of bone pain. There were certainly moments like when you have doubts because you feel like you're going to die, or, you're like very realistic. Like I might go to bed and not wake up tonight. There were those moments where it's like, am I on the right medication? But I just had a lot of faith in this person. And so I just kind of stuck to it, like blinders on, let's go. Like, let's get through it. Let's hunker down. So, it was really, I owed this person a lot, this doctor.
Yeah. And so when you do start feeling a little bit better and you see some improvement and you see that this is actually working, I mean, is that what the doctor's saying? Like, okay, I think that we're making some progress, or is it just the way that you're feeling, or are they looking at the blood work and they're like, yes, this is making a noticeable difference?
Yeah. So the drug was working extraordinarily well. Like my blood cell count when I was first was 140,000 per whatever the unit is, and a week later it was at like 15 or 10.
Wow.
So part of the reason I was so sick is because my body was just literally destroying cancer. Wow. Like 97% of my blood was cancerous cells when I was diagnosed. And so that number was dropping rapidly. But because I was so sick and quality of life was so poor that we didn't think it was going to be a realistic choice long-term to stay on this medication because my quality of life was awful, terrible, unlivable conditions. So that's where we like came to this point where it was, do we wait and see if these side effects subside, or do we need to pull you off because, you're dying from the side effects? So that was, we were obviously looking at the blood work and the medicine side, but quality of life was a huge conversation topic for us.
Yeah. So, that's that's got to be some really difficult periods of your life, your parents' life, the doctor's life. I mean, everybody kind of deciding to go down this road, but then, obviously you start making some really big recoveries because, I mean, you were just saying when we started this conversation that you're saying that this happened when you were 16 and that when you were 17, you moved to Orlando. So that is like 180 degrees from what we're talking about now. So how did that happen? Like where you started feeling so much better, and then, tell me about that.
Yeah, it happened really fast. So the period of time when I was extremely, extremely ill was like 4 months. But then when I started to feel better, that snowballed. Like that was a very fast process. I was just talking to someone about this yesterday. I can still remember the moment I was sitting in class. And I was like, I feel high right now. Like I feel high. I'm confused. I didn't smoke weed. And I was like, I feel high. And then I realized it was the first time in 6 months or more that I hadn't felt pain.
Nice.
And so I distinctly remember this moment where it's like, I feel good. And I remember the feeling. I was a gymnast, so I was a strong young lady. But then when I got sick, and was laying in bed for 20 hours a day, just lost so much weight, muscle tone. So I remember the feeling of like, I feel strong. Like I could feel like being strong again. And that was like, I was a pretty like stubborn, fiery young lady. So like that strength, it just like fired me up. And basically, having this prognosis of, well, I don't know how long this medication is going to work for, because we still don't know how long it'll work. It hasn't been around for that long. So it was like, I'm moving to Orlando, going to wakeboard. Don't know what's going to happen after that, but that's just what I'm going to do. Nice. And when you're kind of the cancer girl, people can't really say no to you. So that's where I kind of just told everyone what I was going to do. And then was lucky enough that my sister was like super into it as well. So yeah, it was
the wakeboarding,
a really interesting time. Yeah.
Like, it seems like, I don't know. I've talked to so many different people on this podcast, and there's this moment in their life where they make this decision and they're drawn to something. Like I mentioned in our pre-interview, we were talking about Jessica Dixie Mills, which is somebody that I've had a couple of podcasts with, and she decided after she had gotten a degree in engineering and was working in an oil field in Oklahoma that she didn't like this. She was going to quit her job, and she was drawn to the Appalachian Trail. And then she hiked the Appalachian Trail and then went on to hike the other big trails, Continental Divide and the Pacific Crest Trail. But it's interesting that it was almost, to her, it was so clear. Like she didn't even know why. Like you don't know why it was exactly the Appalachian Trail. And it went back to something she had seen in her childhood, that her grandmother had walked her up to this sign, and she was like, "What is the Appalachian Trail?" And she's like, "Well, you could walk all the way to Maine if you got on there." And she was,
no way.
For like her whole life, she was thinking about that, I guess, like even subconsciously, like, oh. And so that's where she went. So like you, all of a sudden you decide, I'm going to Orlando and I'm going to go wakeboarding. I mean, was that just like the most perfect memory for you? And that's just like, this is what I'm going to do. Had you been thinking about that, or?
Yeah. I mean, I had, before being diagnosed, had wanted to do this. Yeah. I had wanted to go to Orlando. I'd wanted to pursue this. And then, the leukemia diagnosis was just kind of the catalyst to like getting everyone else on board for me to do it. Or like really pulling the trigger, because I think without that, I think I would have had the courage to do it, but it would have been more difficult. There were still many moments after that where I doubted what I was doing, because I come from, my dad is a very traditional guy. So if you don't have health insurance or a 401k, like you will cease to exist. Like that's what I thought, like if I didn't have a 9 to 5, I was not even going to exist anymore. And so it took a long time where I was like going for it in wakeboarding, but also like going to school and getting a finance degree, because I was, scared of really going all in on wakeboarding. My first contest, I was like, saw how good all the other girls were and how they'd been competing their whole lives. So there were times for sure where I was filled with doubt, and it really held me back. It wasn't really, and at one point I just quit wakeboarding when I was like 19, like living in Orlando, but I just quit doing it because I was like, I'm not good enough. This just isn't realistic. And I had a conversation with one of my mentors. He was the editor of Wakeboarding magazine at the time, and a good friend. And he said, well, you don't have to be the best to be a pro wakeboarder, right? was like, what do you mean? Go on. And he was just like, well, this is a lifestyle sport. This is people want to sponsor people who are good advocates. And, I was still good at wakeboarding, but I wasn't the best. And so that conversation really was like, oh, like just wakeboard my way and do this my way. And there's still value in that. So I went through many different phases of like this doubt, am I wasting my time? Am I doing the right thing? I still love the sport, but what am I really doing? Before I kind of found my space in the industry. And that's when I started sharing my cancer story. No one knew that I had cancer up until years after I moved to Orlando. But that's when I started sharing that and really, seeing the effect that had on other people and, use that to raise money for charities and tie that into everything and kind of created this platform that wasn't just, I'm a competitive wakeboarder who's trying to win contests. It was bigger than that.
Yeah.
So, like everyone, or like many people, I should say, it wasn't linear. Yeah. It wasn't, I moved to Orlando when I was 17 and then rode off into the sunset. A lot of struggles, inner struggles through that time, but learned so much.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there are a couple of key moments there, like that conversation where you decide that not only can you do wakeboarding your way, but it sounds like maybe that's something that you kind of go back to even today, of maybe you can live your life your way, that you can do these other things your way. How does that,
totally.
Do you think about that conversation still today and apply it to the rest of your life?
Yeah, I do. And I think, that conversation, it changed my wakeboarding career, but it definitely has just opened my eyes to the fact that you don't have to be the spitting image of someone else who has done your thing. So like me working in TV, I don't have to be the bright blonde, perfect, lots of makeup. Like I showed up for all of my, like when I first wanted to get into TV, I showed up as me wholeheartedly, 100% myself, because I was like, I can't act. So if I start acting now, this is going to be a really long career, a really long job. So I just showed up as myself, and it was amazing to hear the feedback that people really knew. Like, we like you because you're authentic. It's very clear that you are being yourself. And so I certainly applied that thinking to everything else that I do. Like, you don't have to do it the same way as someone else has done it before. You can obviously learn from them and what they've done and use that to help you on your career journey, but you don't have to do it the same way.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. That's super cool. So why did you gravitate to TV?
Growing up, I had always thought about being a sports broadcaster. Like, that was when I found out, like, I wasn't going to be the next Randy Moss because I was in 5'3". And then I was like, well, what's the next best thing? Kind of like sports broadcasting. But being from this small town, I was like, well, I mean, I'm not going to never be on TV, like, even though I was like, I'm going to go be a professional wakeboarder, like, being a sports broadcaster was just like, yeah, right. That won't happen. Well, then, like, through my wakeboarding career, I got a number of opportunities in television that just kind of fell into my lap. So I was on an MTV series, a 12-episode MTV series.
What was that one?
I did some stuff for Travel Channel.
What was
that? Was called Wake Brothers.
Okay, so it was like it had wakeboarding as a part of it, right?
Yes, It was centered around Bob and Phil Sovin, and I was dating Bob at the time, so ended up being a character on the show, and that was kind of my first TV experience. And then did stuff for Travel Channel. Was in a couple like TV commercials. Was in like the opening scene of a movie. And so just had a number of things that kind of fell into my lap that I hadn't been pursuing. And then when I was ready to transition out of wakeboarding, I struggled really hard again. But I was like, if I don't go all in on TV right now and go for it, I'll regret it for the rest of my life, 100%. And if I'm going to do this, I have to just go all in. Like, I can't have one foot in, one foot out. And that was just a really interesting time. And to see my hard work pay off, then like getting all these TV gigs, it was just really fulfilling. Like, I took this risk and was very nervous about it, and it worked. It's just an awesome feeling.
So what does going all in on the TV look like at that point in your life? You know, like everybody's got these points where they can kind of, I guess at this, maybe it was like you could kind of keep the wakeboarding thing going. Did you have to quit that? Is that what all in looked like? Or
yeah, it was like I wasn't really making any money from wakeboarding anymore. It's hard as a female to make money wakeboarding. There are a couple girls who are getting by. So at that time, it was like I was working other jobs to pay the bills, and it was to go all in on TV. It was just, okay, I need to stop everything that I'm doing, just absolutely blitz this industry, and really focus wholeheartedly, like not get distracted by all these other things that I probably should be doing, you know, to pay the bills. It was just, and like admitting to people, I think one of the hardest things was like admitting to people that I was going to try this TV thing, like, and not being insecure about that. So I think going all in, it was like, no. Like, you have to tell yourself and everyone else, like, this is what you're going for. You know, don't try to hide it. Don't try to like halfway do it. If I get a job, then people will believe me, you know, that type of thing. It was like really being honest with myself and being mature enough to say, I'm going to try this. And if I fail, okay, you know,
that's a big thing. You know, you hear it's written in billions of books about, you know, how to accomplish any goal. Is one of the big things is you tell people that that's what you're going to do. And now you're in. You just told everybody what you're going to do. This is now you have to do it. And that can be a really big motivator for some people. And for other people, it's not as big a motivator, but it sounds like that was a pretty big motivator for you to tell people. But that's part of like, don't you think that that's like part of going for it in anything is like, you know, stopping the part-time jobs, stopping the wakeboarding, stopping a lot of things, and saying no to things can be as big of a jump as saying yes to other things. Because it's easy to like say yes to a little audition here or there and keep doing everything else. But it's like that time when you just decide I'm not doing no more of that. It's
hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard to give those things up. And because it's risky, right? Like you use those as kind of a safety net, but if you're doing that, you're always distracted, or you're always making an excuse like, well, I got to work this other job, so I can't do this. Like, you know, it's removing all of that. It's kind of like baggage, right? Like remove the safety net and jump in. Like, that's the only way it's going to happen, or that's like the only way it was going to happen for me. And so that was difficult, but also just awesome, like a very freeing feeling. And then being like, well, if I'm going to give this a shot, I'm going to give it my best shot versus like a half-ass shot. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what you did with the wakeboarding? Did you have a decision like that in wakeboarding?
I think my wakeboarding career was always I was always also doing something else on the side.
Yeah.
And like, by the time I kind of figured out this mindset that I needed to be in, it was too late. And so it's kind of disappointing thinking about what could have been with my wakeboarding career, but having been able to learn that through wakeboarding, knowing I always knew I wasn't going to wakeboard forever. Like, that was never a goal. That's just not realistic. Like, having been able to learn that and now apply that to my passion, working in television and, going for that, it was worth it.
Nice.
Worth learning that lesson.
So what are the first couple of kind of breaks that you get that give you the idea that this is possible? Like what you're envisioning of a career in television, that this could actually work?
So it was pretty like right away, a couple really big things. So I threw together a demo reel. I went out, like I put all my experience in a reel, but then I went out and did some like fake news broadcasts, like just faked it, and stories, like went to a coffee shop and like, pretend I was on a travel show and did some stuff like that. And I send that out into the world. I reach out, I email every news person. I didn't want to work in news, but those were the people that I knew worked in television. So I was out to everyone, people in Florida, people here in Minnesota, people that I didn't know, anyone that I knew that worked in TV. I sent it out and I made a couple really cool connections. So one of the newscasters here in Minnesota He has like a lifestyle piece that he does every Sunday, a really cool Minnesota lifestyle piece. And I went and met with him, and he's like, look, we don't have any opportunities here, but I feel like you should go talk to my friends at Ron Shera Productions. They're an outdoors
I know
productions company.
Well, I don't know Ron Shera that well, but I know his production.
Yep. So I went and I had met up with them, and they're like, hey, we don't have any shows for you right now, but we'll keep you on the radar. You know, I was like, sweet, great.
Did you meet his dog Raven? Didn't he used to do that show, Ron and Raven?
Yeah. Raven just passed away.
Oh, that's too bad.
I know it was a big deal, but I did get to meet Raven.
Nice.
Which was pretty cool. So I had a conversation with them. At the same time, I have this Instagram follower who kind of always pops up, and he's always like making videos and stuff. He's from Minnesota. And I had reached out to him. Hey, I know I don't really know you, but I know you make videos. Could you put together a demo reel for me? And he's like, well, I didn't know that you wanted to work in TV. And I was like, yeah, you know, I really am trying to get into it. He's like, oh, I'm the digital content producer for the Timberwolves, and my best friend's the digital content producer for the Minnesota Vikings. And I was like,
nice.
Oh, and he's like, I think the Vikings are looking for a female personality. I was like, oh, okay. So then I package up my demo reel and I send it off to him. And in the same week, so then like months pass, in the same week, I get a call from Ron Shera Productions, and I get a call from the Minnesota Vikings, both saying, hey, we have part-time gigs. Would you ever consider moving back to Minnesota? And when the Vikings call, you pick up the phone, you answer. And so it was kind of just this no-brainer. Like, I never thought that I would move back to Minnesota, but it's sure an easy move when you're starting a new career and trying something out. Like, what an easy transition. So I moved back, and I started working for the Vikings. Then I started hosting shows for Ron Shera, and now I host 2 shows for them. So it was like, there wasn't much time to like doubt myself. But there were certainly people that I reached out to that weren't very nice. You know, I reached out to like editors of newspapers. Hey, can I write for you? You know, really just everyone that I could possibly think of. And so there were people who like tried making me feel stupid, but I just like had to keep going. Like I knew that I was going to have to throw mud, you know, like put all the irons in the fire, and most of them, you know, weren't going to come out, but it's just the one that does. So it happened again, very serendipitous that they both of these groups called in the same week. But yeah, pretty awesome.
I wonder, you know, sometimes when I think about that, like serendipitous, is it that you kind of went for it, and then it takes a certain amount of time for stuff to develop? Like you started sending all this stuff out, and it just kind of takes some time for things to develop. And yeah, maybe it happened in the same week, but had you not made that decision to really go for it and send your reel to everybody you could possibly think of, neither one of those things would have really happened, you know? So it's kind of serendipitous, but it's kind of like you made it happen too. I mean, you did.
I mean, I don't feel lucky because trust me, I was working my butt off, like, you know, reaching out to people, but it was really ironic and unique that they both happened at the same time. But you're right. The conversation that I had at Ron Shera Productions was at least a full year prior to them calling me and saying, hey, remember us? And I wouldn't have met them had I not reached out to the random newscaster who then was like, hey, you should go talk to my friends over at Ron Shera. Like, Ron Shera Productions wouldn't even know who I was, nor would the Minnesota Vikings. You know, I was living in Orlando. So it took a lot of being uncomfortable and reaching out to people for advice and not really knowing what I'm talking about, but being willing to learn.
Yeah.
I was just like, hey, can I just learn from you then? Like, you might not have a job for me, but I'm new to this and I'm not pretending to know everything about it. So it was like really just being fully open and honest and being willing to like soak up knowledge, even if that's the only thing someone has to offer me. All of those things. So it's a lot of hard work, but I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I got kind of right off the bat.
So with Ron Shera, you're now hosting 2 shows for them or him?
Yep.
And
one
are they?
Made for the Outdoors that airs on Fox Sports North and Wisconsin, and also nationwide on the Sportsman channel. That's a fun one. We go and we show how outdoor products are made.
Yeah.
So whether we're building a pontoon or a revolver or fishing lure, I get to go in there. I get to get my hands dirty. I weld. I do whatever they'll let me do, basically. So that one's really fun. And then the other show is called Destination Polaris. We travel the world and we ride Polaris side-by-side vehicles and explore different parts, mostly, in the United States, but different parts of the world, and showcase these machines and also the cool people that we meet along the way.
That's
so
awesome.
That's a lot of fun.
So the how it's made seems like that is a perfect kind of a perfect recipe to continue through the COVID situation that we find ourselves in. Like that seems like you could continue that. The traveling around the world and riding side by sides, that seems like that one might experience some hiccups or challenges. Is that kind of where you are now, or what's going on with that?
Well, they were both completely on hold for at least 3 months,
really?
Which was a big stress for us because we turned stuff around pretty fast. We were halfway through both seasons and we didn't have new content. Episodes 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 weren't filmed yet. So we had to get really creative with how we did some of that stuff. We are back to filming both of those shows now, and being able to travel for those. We take many, many precautions to keep ourselves safe and the people that we work with. But it was a challenging time. It was still challenging because now we're like, go, 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 the COVID catch-up game.
Right.
But it was a really challenging time just for, like anyone, just the unknown of when are we going to get back to work? Are we going back to work?
Yeah.
Are we making television again? But I am lucky, whereas like people are consuming more television than they ever have. And there are no sports. So I'm getting all this airtime on Fox Sports, or was before all the sports came back.
Right.
So it was like a blessing and a curse. Like we're getting great numbers here, but we need to make more content. So it was a challenge, like it was, I'm sure, for everyone, but we're kind of back up and running now.
Yeah, that's cool. And so on that one, the how it's made, will you just go anywhere that I mean, like I've always liked that show, How It's Made, which is like, I don't know, you could see anything being made. And then I watched your trailer of your show, or actually a few episodes of the show, and it's like all about the outdoor gear, which I thought was even cooler because how is a snow ski made, or
right,
whatever, and it's kind of cool. But I just wondered if it was like if you pick people that are in a certain area of the country, or
that is
anywhere.
It's nationwide, and we try to mix it up. We want to show a variety of products, all things that tie into the outdoors somehow, but we want to show different stuff. It's like the show you mentioned, How It's Made. I mean, it could be a bowling ball, but you're like, right. Yeah, I never really knew how a bowling ball was made. That's interesting. One of the fun things about that show, though, is we really tell the story of the people behind the products as well. So the companies, the people who are working in a factory who've been punching a hole, Charlie back there has been drilling this hole for 35 years. Like this is what he does every day.
He's the best at it, by the way, too.
He's the best, but he never gets, this is his moment, like to share his story and show his personality. So it's fun to go in there and meet these people who aren't trying to be on television, but like really sharing the story of the people behind the products as well. So we do a variety of products all over the country. As long as it's got some connection to the outdoors, we'll be interested.
Yeah, that's cool. So do you have any other things kind of cooking, or are you happy where you are, or what's going on?
I'm on air at the CW Twin Cities as well. We've got a crew of 3 hosts, me and 2 gentlemen here who do all kinds of stuff. So we have a variety show Saturdays at 5 p.m. on the CW Twin Cities, where we get to interview or go do whatever we want across the state, which is really fun. Right now, I'm not doing anything with the Vikings for obvious reasons. They're running a very, very tight ship in the NFL. So not doing anything with them. Would love to get back on that next season, hopefully, if things return to normal. But other than that, just like, busy with all kinds of random stuff. I'm working with a hat company called Melon. I'm about to create my own signature hat line, which I'm really stoked on because I love hats.
Yeah.
And they're a really cool company. So I'm excited about that, and working with a couple really other, cool groups. Steady MD, I work with them. They're a teledoctor platform, which like I'm all about healthcare. I deal with that stuff every day, and this is definitely the future. And they're really, really cool to work with. I love using their products. So, just trying to continue to work with cool brands that I believe in and make good TV.
That's awesome. Well, you have such a good kind of sunny disposition, like a good, happy personality. And I wanted to ask you, and it comes through in your television work. Like when I watched your reel, I mean, you're just having a good time, and you're doing it, and you're doing it in an authentic way. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are kind of gravitating to you, is that what you're doing is not an act. It's not something that can they count on you showing up like this tomorrow, or is this kind of like an act? Like, right. and then if you see through it, you're kind of like, yeah, well, this is her. And then when you learn more about your story, kind of like, one of the things that I was wondering and I wanted to ask you about is, it seems pretty obvious, but it seems like this darkest moment of your life of cancer has had an effect on your life that causes you to be so sunny and happy, and like it just seems like you're just a really grateful person, and you're living life in a state of gratitude. And I just wonder how that period affected that, or if that's something that you think about this far away from that. I mean, how many years has it been since
14?
So it's been 14 years since you were diagnosed, and is that something that you think about on a daily basis, or what?
Well, so because technically I am still living with leukemia. So this drug that I take is an oral chemotherapy pill, and I take that every day. So, and it comes with many side effects. So I am forced to think about my cancer, whether I like it or not, every day, because I take the medication. I feel the effects of the drug. But this question is interesting because I get it all the time. Did cancer change your perspective on life? And the honest answer, I mean, of course, it has a huge effect on my life, and I'm grateful for that experience, and I'm filled with even more gratitude now. But I was a really grateful, happy, love to have fun kid too. I'd been through a lot of, hard experiences with a parents' divorce and some stuff like that as a very young child. And I think those other experiences really set me up for success with the cancer. Like, I think my perspective was set before I was diagnosed with leukemia. And so leukemia was just a part of the journey. Certainly, going through something as deep as, okay, not sure if I'm going to wake up tomorrow. That's a heavy experience that will change you for sure.
Yeah.
Feeling going to a place that you didn't know existed kind of in your mind, in your body, and in your heart. But I really I've just always loved to have fun. Like a kid, like you name it. If we got to do it, I mean, if I've got to clean a porta potty on a hot summer day, I'm going to have fun doing it. Well, we got to do it anyways. So might as well have fun with it. I've just always really enjoyed life, like really, really enjoyed life and enjoyed living, and am grateful for the people and the experiences and the memories.
Yeah. What kind of advice would you give somebody that hasn't had that type of experience? Like their life's been perfect up to, what kind of advice do you even, I mean, not like people like that are asking you for advice, but I'm just kind of wondering what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of, research being done. Like, do you have to have that dark time in order to have the opposite, like that gratitude, really? That perspective?
I haven't heard about that. Yeah, there is. And
I'll send you some stuff.
I'd like to read that.
My friend Al just sent me some stuff on it. I think the biggest thing is keeping yourself in check. It's being honest with yourself, and also, having gratitude for those things in your life, having gratitude for the things that are going right. It's all perspective. So it's like, I get carried away sometimes, and I am reminded every day, like I'm humbled every day by taking this pill and like, you still have cancer, like you still have to deal with the side effects of this medication. You're still a human. You still, the future is still unknown. So it's like really staying humble. I think that's no matter what happens in your life, staying humble and being grateful. I think that's the biggest thing, no matter what you've been through previous.
Nice. I like it. That's a good perspective. There's this one little phrase that I come back to quite often that has been a big part of my life. And it's weakness is strength. So whatever you perceive as your greatest weakness, or whatever is your greatest weakness or was once your greatest weakness, at some point in your life, it will turn into your greatest strength. So if that is, maybe it's your cancer, or maybe it is inexperience, like that, you feel like you can't do something because you have no experience. Well, in my experience, that's kind of funny to say that. In my experience, that eventually, if you work hard enough at it, you come at something with a different perspective. And because you have no experience with it, you're trying things that other people wouldn't try, or trying them in a different way. And you're doing things differently than if you were strong in that area. And then that becomes your greatest strength. Has that been a theme? It seems like that's kind of been a theme in your life as I explain it like that too.
Yeah, for me, I always kind of say your weakness or your thing, whatever you think is holding you back, it'll either become your excuse or your reason.
Nice.
Like you are the only one who makes that an obstacle in your life. But if you use it as an excuse, it'll certainly hold you back. But if that becomes your reason, then you have this extra power. Like you have a superpower. You have, a reason to push even harder than everyone else. But I really like what you just said. I spoke to this professional skimboarder. Her name's Amber Torrealba. I was having a conversation with her a couple weeks ago, and she came from a low income family and just not many things going for her. And she looks at all these things as just, my parents didn't have money. They didn't have money to get me training or to do this or do that. But that gave me a different perspective, which was valuable.
Yeah.
So it's just like what you're saying is whatever your weakness is, that gives you a different perspective than anyone else out there, or you have this extra perspective. And I thought that was such a cool way to look at all these things that were like, well, I can't because X, or, I had a less chance of success because of this. Like, well, actually you had a different perspective than everyone else. So you that is actually your strength.
Right. You may have had a greater chance because of that.
Yeah, exactly. But you may have had an advantage.
Yeah. You have to stick with it. It certainly, believe me, it does not seem like an advantage at the time, but 10 years later, you're like, well, that was the biggest advantage that I ever had. Like, first of all, I think it's cool as it can be that there is such a thing as a professional skimboarder. Like that, to make that happen at all is super cool. You know what I mean? Like that. And I'm sure that that's probably a bigger industry than fishing. And I'm a professional fisherman of sorts, but you probably get paid more to be a professional skimboarder, but I think it's super cool that she was able to make that happen. But like, if she didn't have any training and she didn't have any, the best board or whatever. So she goes with what she has, and she probably comes up with tricks that nobody else thought of, because that's not what they're teaching you, and it's cool. Like, even if you look at like chess, like, Waitskin, Josh Waitskin, he was like the chess prodigy. Well, he learned how to play chess like on the streets. Like he went to the park and learned how to play chess in the park, and it is not at all like what they're teaching you. And and he's playing with these guys that are formally trained, and they do all the things just the way that you're supposed to. But he comes at it with this whole other angle. Yeah. And he becomes really great at it. But that's awesome. I love that. And I think that your perspective on everything is probably even more important than your skills at doing whatever that is. And the skill will come.
For sure.
But if you can get through those times when it seems like you have all these disadvantages, those disadvantages will turn out to be your strength. But most people don't. Most people use that, just like you say, is that's your excuse. Or what did you say? It's your reason, or it's
well, it's either our weaknesses or our downfalls are either our excuse or it's a reason to push you.
Yes.
And so like I always say, I mean, I have the best excuse to get out of anything ever. If I don't want to go to work, if I didn't want to go to school, if I don't want to clean the house, I'm like, well, I have cancer, so can't do it. But I know that the minute I start using that as an excuse, that's when cancer holds me back. That's when cancer defines who I am. That is, when it becomes my excuse. And so not making those excuses and actually saying, well, this has fired me up even more. This has pushed me even harder because I have cancer. That's when it's like, no, it's my strength.
Nice. I love it. I think we're going to stop right there. I don't know how we could do better than that. It's fantastic. And you have such a cool story. And I just wish you all the very best. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the different shows. And I'm sure that you'll go much further than that. But tell everyone how they can follow you, how they can support what you're doing, and get to know you better.
Sure. So I'm on all the social media platforms, Instagram being the biggest for me. My handle is @AlexaScore. Same for Twitter. And I'm on Facebook as well. You can head to my website, alexarscore.com, and reach out. Follow the journey. Come along for the ride. The more, the merrier. But I'm out there. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you very much for doing this. And it was great to get to know you a little bit better. And we look forward to watching you take off and go even further.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. Thanks. All right. We'll see everybody next week with another great story. That was Alexa Score. Go follow her and check out everything that she's doing. And we'll see you next week.